Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub Podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. Marek, we're going to talk about technology today. Before we do, we get a lot of questions about your background. It's not a virtual background. You're actually in your office. And those sharp implements behind you, are these ways for you to discipline your family, or what's going on there? Or is it when you do your deals with clients, they see that in the background, they think, this guy's serious?
And I think this is not somebody to mess with. Well, actually, first of all, they're actually military daggers, officers' daggers. And one day we could do a whole video cast, but I'm not sure that our audience would be interested in them.
Well, now everybody knows they're military daggers, and you may have heard Marek sprinkle little military references and military history in the episodes that we've had here on the Last Mile Prophets. Well, we're not going to go into military history today. We're going to talk about something very modern, being technology, and in particular how technology relates to the last mile. And no, this is not going to be 8 minutes of us talking about interactive delivery management, really. But Marek, you've got what do you call technology in the last mile? You call it the what?
The secret sauce.
The secret sauce. So how do people get it wrong though? Because surely this is something, it's not new. The customers demand all these technology-driven delivery solutions. So why are we still talking about it?
Actually, Ian, I think it is new. You'll probably recall, even 10, 15 years ago, technology was a supporting factor. It wasn't the last mile. Whereas if you really think about it today, it's what holds the whole last mile together, because without technology, and I'm particularly talking about software at the moment, you don't know what the customer wants, where he is or she is.
Oh yeah, 10 years ago it was all very different. The track and trace was seen as sort of the premium level service, especially in the postal world. But you just mentioned things like, knowing where the driver is. I mean, that wasn't even thought about back then.
Well, absolutely. So what has happened is, from being something that supports the last mile, it has really actually become the last mile, because if you think about it, all the sexy things people want today are driven by technology.
I was going to say, the things that people complain about are all technology related. Where's my driver? Why hasn't it been delivered as predicted? So it is. I would agree with what you've said there, that technology is central to what's happening. So then what are some of the key things to make the delivery experience best using technology? Because I just want to go back to something we mentioned last week, the week before. I can't remember now. We're talking about the technology in parcel lockers, and how parcel lockers is great, but if you don't get the technology right, then it's just a big lump of metal.
Absolutely. And I think this is where it started, because we started discussing, which videocast topic we get. And it came from the webinar we had with Rafael Broska from InPost, where actually both he and I came to the conclusion that it is actually the software now that is fundamental. Because as you said, maybe it's a little bit unfair to say a lock is a piece of metal because there's some hardware in there. But actually, if you have a choice of having a really great piece of hardware with very poor software. So let's give an example that people really understand. You have an Uber ride in an average car, but the technology works perfectly. The car comes exactly when you want it, to the right address, delivers you to the right place for the right price. You may have a really great car, so a nice, beaming...
A late model BMW, a black 5 Series or 7 Series, whatever it is, compared to a Hyundai i10.
Okay, but the car comes late. The driver doesn't really understand where you're going and goes in circles because the route optimization software is wrong, and you get charged too much. So which experience is better?
Well, it's got to be the best customer-focused solution. If you've been given what you wanted and all of that, then that's the one that you prefer. So no matter how nice the outside of your car is, you might not get a 5-star rating on Uber.
And therefore, what this is actually saying, it's all about the guys and girls who get the technology, the software right. Because I'd also argue that a lot of the issue with the legacy carriers is they haven't got the right software, allowing them to be customer-centric enough, allowing them to be flexible. So for me, the next battleground isn't going to be the pieces of metal. It's going to be the software piece of metal, i.e. lockers.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
It's going to be the software, because actually, if you're starting from scratch, you have no networks, then actually in the first instance anyway, you can have PUDOs, which are more dependent on software, using smartphones perhaps. So I really think that it's going to be the masters of software are going to be the masters of the new last mile. Now, logically, what does that mean? Look at Amazon. super smart with software. They're changing the face of the last mile. Google haven't got there yet, but I can just imagine this coming relatively soon, where they find a way, because they have such good access to us, all of us, everywhere. Imagine they start creating software for the last mile where they can consolidate, track and trace, and preference information. The kings of the castle are going to be the guys who control the software. I'm absolutely certain. Now, this is where you challenge me, because I'm sure you want to find something to challenge me on.
Well, ordinarily I would, Marek, but one of the things that we've got in the legacy sector, if I can call like posts, etc., the legacy sector, is a huge investments in technology over a long period of time, whereby that legacy technology has to be stitched together with new technology to make it work, because there might be massive systems to do with event management and tracking and all of that was built 10 years ago, 15 years ago. In other words, bring your own device and that sort of attitude. So it is a difficult rollout for those big posts, especially when you're talking about a delivery network that might have 30,000 or 100,000 or 300,000 delivery drivers. And there might be a change in the handheld technology or whatever. There's a lot of cost involved. But at the risk of preempting what you're going to say is, if you don't upgrade, then you may as well just pack up your bags and go home. Yeah?
Ian, I'm actually really pleased that you said that. And I'll tell you why.
Because you'll be accused of being anti-posts otherwise. I just want to quickly mention something. Well, go on. You say what you're going to say.
Let me answer this one, because this is really cool, because this is exactly the standard postal. And by the way, it's not just postal. It's the large legacy carriers say exactly the same thing. And the reality is, sometimes it is not as complicated and as expensive as you might think to change things. The problem is here. So, and I'll give you a real example. When I was working at DPD, we had this really big, stable system called Delicom, which was the DPD Europe system. It was big. It was sturdy. It was expensive. You wanted to change something, then you put a change request in, and it would take weeks or months.
Yeah.
Particularly if you were a smaller market, not the German market.
Yeah.
So, and I still remember when I went to my boss, a lady called Kay Phillips, by the way, from whom I learned an awful lot, who was a real operator. And she in the end, she didn't like it. We said, okay, but your head's on the block. And I set up something called IT for EM, IT for emerging markets, together with a group of super smart people, where for my region, or for the majority of my region, I think about 10 countries, we created a completely new, flexible, innovative tech solution. And we were talking millions, not tens of millions. And these are quite big operations. We're talking several thousand couriers in several markets. So it can be done. The problem was here. And I have to admit, I was really worried because I felt my head on the block. But you know what? I had no choice, because I knew if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be customer-centric enough. And before I let you jump in here, and another great example, probably an even better one, is DPD UK. They have their own tech solution. It's not the legacy solution of the group. It's their own solution. And look where it took them. So honestly, I think tech, and particularly software tech, is king.
Well, I was going to throw in there that there's also the scope for the big operators to have partnerships with some of the startups, etc. But we're running out of time, Marek. So I don't have time to go into that today. But it's something perhaps for us to talk about in a future episode, about tie-ups between legacy carriers and startups. Marek Różycki, thanks for being part of the Last Mile Profits today.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. And I'll just add, I can imagine we're going to have a few very, very interested tech companies who are going to knock on our door.
Comment below.
Video on that.
Comment below, tech companies that want to get involved. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time on the Last Mile Profits.